You know movie villains. The real ones live next door. There's a trusted family doctor, a cult guru, a smiling grandmother. They hid in plain sight, collecting victims while communities applauded. Tonight, we uncover 39 names you've probably never heard. From Manchester surgeries to Tokyo subways, evil wore everyday uniforms. One forged wills, another filmed crimes, another sold death like business. How did neighbors miss it? And why did systems fail? Stay until the end, because the last story changes everything. Hit play and meet the terrifying strangers history left unnamed. Harold Shipman, trusted doctor who murdered his patients. A beloved family doctor quietly became Britain's most notorious murderer. Harold Shipman practiced in Greater Manchester, visiting elderly patients at home. He used medical trust like a key, unlocking doors without suspicion. Investigators noticed patterns: sudden deaths, cremations ordered, records curiously altered. A forged will for Kathleen Grundy finally cracked the quiet facade. Exhumations followed, revealing morphine overdoses administered under the guise. Courts heard testimonies from Hyde, families recalling routine visits before tragedy. He denied it, yet meticulous charts pointed exactly where needles went. The scandal reshaped UK oversight, tightening death certification and prescription practices. Alexander Pichushkin, Moscow's chessboard killer who wanted 64. Moscow police chased a killer obsessed with filling a chessboard. Alexander Pichushkin hunted in Bitsa Park, inviting acquaintances for drinks. Conversations ended near wells and construction sites, where victims disappeared. He boasted about 64, aligning murders with black squares imagined. Detectives followed a supermarket receipt, the clue that finally stuck. CCTV from Kashirskoye showed his companion's final hours before vanishing. Arrested in 2006, he guided officers to hidden scenes. Courtrooms watched him recount details with chilling precision and pride. Russia recalculated fears, realizing a park path masked multiple graves. Karl Panzram, the serial killer who hated humanity. A drifter's confession read like a map of American nightmares. Karl Panzram rode rails, stole boats, and broke into mansions. He blamed brutal prisons, then answered brutality with more relentless violence. New York, Oregon, and Minnesota sheriffs traded notes about the Wanderer. In Washington, D.C., he burglarized houses just to taunt authorities. He later confessed to murders overseas, claims investigators struggled verifying. A young guard, Henry Lesser, preserved letters detailing crimes and rage. Those pages painted America's rails as highways for untraceable predators. Eventually, Kansas authorities ended a trail he seemed proud of. Belle Gunness, Black Widow who vanished after a fire. Fire revealed more than ashes on Belle Gunness's Indiana farm. LaPorte neighbors arrived curious, then watched investigators start digging. Burlap bundles appeared from orchards, each one hiding a secret. Suitors had traveled west answering ads promising farmland and marriage. They brought savings, wrote letters, then conveniently stopped writing home. After the fire, a headless body complicated everything about identification. Some believed Belle fled, others insisted she died that night. Either way, the orchard kept yielding names, rings, and watches. America learned lonely hearts could hide ledgers darker than barns. Mary Ann Cotton, Britain's prolific Victorian poisoner. Victorian Britain whispered about a widow who outlived everyone. Mary Ann Cotton moved towns often, marrying, nursing, and burying relatives. Arsenic poisoning mimicked stomach illness, convenient for doctors signing certificates. Insurance policies stacked up like hymnals on a church pew. A suspicious physician saved samples, finally sending them for testing. Detectives traced deaths through County Durham, piecing together restless moves. Arrest followed, along with headlines comparing grief to bookkeeping strategies. Court testimony explained how arsenic hid inside everyday household products. The story reshaped poison control, showing grief sometimes carried receipts. Amelia Dyer, the baby farmer who killed for profit. River mud near Reading exposed a business built on despair. Amelia Dyer advertised adoption, then handled babies with fatal pragmatism. Parcel paper carried her address, the thread detectives finally grabbed. Nurses had noticed patterns, but Victorian shame kept questions quiet. Railway arches and riverbanks yielded evidence of hurried, heartless disposal. Courtrooms outside London filled, shocked by the scale and method. Officials tightened adoption rules, wary of advertisements promising instant solutions. Newspapers printed baby clothes as proof that promises turned predatory. The Thames kept secrets until a name tag betrayed everything. Jane Toppin, nurse who confessed to dozens of murders. Hospital wards trusted a nurse who treated death like company. Jane Toppin worked in Massachusetts, experimenting on patients with drugs. She reportedly enjoyed watching life fade while recording clinical notes. Colleagues noticed odd dosing. Then families noticed patterns at funerals. Investigators exhumed bodies, finding combinations inconsistent with prescribed treatments. A Cape Cod household visit ended with multiple deaths and suspicion. Arrested, she described impulses that made prosecutors drop their pens. New England hospitals reviewed protocols, rethinking how nurses were supervised. Her nickname lingered, but the reforms mattered more than headlines. Nanny Doss, the giggling granny with a deadly secret. A grandmother's laughter echoed through crime stories from Oklahoma kitchens. Nanny Doss married repeatedly, collecting columns of tragedies across states. She charmed neighbors, baked pies, and mailed flirtatious Lonely Hearts letters. Relatives fell suddenly ill. Coffee cups sat half-finished on tables. Investigators finally tested samples, confirming suspicions about kitchen ingredients. She confessed casually, nicknames ready, as reporters filled courthouse benches. Police retraced marriages through Alabama, Kansas, and Missouri burial records. Prosecutors emphasized routine moments that hid life-or-death decisions inside. America reconsidered charm, realizing a smile sometimes covered arsenic. Dorothea Puente, the boarding house landlady who buried tenants. Sacramento police dug a boarding house yard and found tenants missing. Dorothea Puente offered rooms to vulnerable people on Social Security. Caseworkers noticed checks arriving while residents stopped keeping appointments. A parole officer's visit sparked a search warrant and shovels. Neighbors remembered Sunday dresses, gardening gloves, and helpful casseroles delivered. Detectives followed paperwork trails through banks and neatly kept ledgers. When questioned, she fled to Los Angeles, then was recognized. Extradited back, she kept her poise while jurors studied photographs. The quiet house on F Street rewrote Sacramento's idea of safety. Leonardo Cianciulli, Italy's infamous soap maker of Correggio. Police in Reggio Emilia confronted rumors about soap and tea cakes. Leonardo Cianciulli, the Correggio shopkeeper, promised fortunes and protection. She targeted women seeking change, offering rituals and new beginnings. Neighbors noticed luggage leaving, but never saw friends returning home. Receipts, letters, and a missing violin teacher tightened investigators' focus. Arrests brought confessions describing recipes nobody wanted to hear. Court testimony referenced superstition, wartime anxiety, and financial desperation colliding. Italy watched headlines mix folklore with forensic accounting and grief. Correggio's quiet streets learned small shops could hide catastrophic betrayals. Anatoly Onoprienko, Ukraine's beast who left villages terrified. Ukraine's winter roads connected villages terrified by nighttime attacks. Anatoly Onoprienko drifted across Zhytomyr and Lviv regions, targeting households. He struck at random, then set fires to erase traces. Survivors described doors kicked open and sudden demands for valuables. Police formed special units, combing forests and patrolling highways nightly. A relative's tip eventually led investigators to a crucial stash. Confession followed, with maps marking scattered scenes across western Ukraine. Courts listened while families from multiple oblasts filled the benches. The case prompted reforms in coordination between regional investigative teams. Ahmad Siraji, Indonesian sorcerer who murdered for ritual power. Sugarcane fields near Medan hid rituals that masked real crimes. Ahmad Siraji worked as a dukun, a traditional Indonesian shaman. Clients sought luck or love, arriving with small offerings and hope. Police discovered shallow graves arranged toward a personal, superstitious goal. A confession described instructions received during dreams from a spirit. Villagers guided officers through plantations, pointing at disturbed earth mounds. Courts balanced cultural context with blunt facts gathered from sites. The trial taught Indonesia to separate tradition from predatory exploitation. Ritual language once whispered now sounded like camouflage for violence. Miyuki Ishikawa, the midwife who became a death dealer. Tokyo officials uncovered infant deaths linked to a respected midwife. Miyuki Ishikawa managed a maternity hospital in post-war Shinjuku wards. She reportedly encouraged neglect when parents lacked money or support. Authorities found records showing systematic decisions disguised as hard realities. Bodies discovered prompted questions about oversight and responsibility within institutions. Prosecutions followed, with sentences lighter than public outrage expected. Japan reconsidered child welfare laws during Reconstruction's difficult economic period. Newspapers framed the case as poverty turning medicine into arithmetic. The hospital's quiet hallways eventually became shorthand for bureaucratic negligence. Thug Bayram, legendary Thuggee strangler leader. Colonial officers chronicled a strangler whose numbers remain fiercely disputed. Thug Bayram appeared in records about India's Thuggee suppression campaigns. He reportedly used a knotted cloth, a tool investigators studied. Some accounts cite hundreds, others argue exaggeration colored early reporting. William Sleeman's files shaped British perceptions of secret highway networks. Modern historians parse testimony, translations, and incentives for confessions. Either way, caravans feared nighttime greetings from friendly strangers. The case shows how policing myths and realities can intertwine. India's colonial archives still spark debates about crime, culture, and power. Edward Lowe, the cruelest pirate you've probably never heard of. Atlantic trade lanes remembered a pirate with a particular cruelty. Edward Lowe, Boston-born, captained ships across the Caribbean and Azores. He targeted merchantmen, forcing choices that terrified seasoned sailors alike. Contemporary logs described mutilations, though some details remain contested. Alliances shifted quickly, with crews mutinying under stress and greed. Royal Navy sloops chased rumors, always a day behind sightings. He vanished from records, leaving legends alongside very real victims. Port cities posted warnings, then welcomed insurance men doing arithmetic. The name still surfaces whenever cruelty outshouts pirate nostalgia. Paul Schaefer, Colonia Dignidad cult tyrant in Chile. Deep in Chile, a German sect hid crimes behind fences. Paul Schaefer founded Colonia Dignidad near Parral during the dictatorship. He posed as a preacher, running hospitals, schools, and farms. Defectors described disappearances, beatings, and secret tunnels beneath buildings. Chilean investigators linked the colony with intelligence services during repression. International pressure mounted as survivors testified in German and Spanish. Eventually, authorities captured Schaefer abroad after years evading warrants. Courts uncovered systematic abuse hidden under humanitarian branding and charity. The settlement's pastoral brochures became exhibits of carefully staged deception. Shoko Asahara, Om Shinrikyo doomsday cult mastermind. Tokyo commuters faced chaos when nerve gas spread through subway cars. Shoko Asahara led Om Shinrikyo, promising salvation through apocalyptic visions. Members released sarin in 1995, targeting the morning rush hour. Earlier incidents had warned Japan, including a rural test near Matsumoto. The group amassed money, scientists, and equipment behind temple walls. Arrests uncovered labs, helicopters plans, and international recruitment outreach. Japan rewrote laws on religious corporations and hazardous materials oversight. Families of victims became advocates, keeping memory ahead of mythology. The subway returned to schedule, but trust recovered more slowly. Basil Zaharov, the shadowy merchant of death. Diplomats whispered that war sometimes traveled by elegant handshake. Basil Zaharov brokered arms deals across Europe during turbulent decades. He sold to rivals, profiting whether negotiations warmed or froze. Legends placed him in salons, bribing ministers and charming monarchs. Journalists struggled separating myth from memos signed in private. Navies expanded fleets, budgets expanded stories about invisible influencers. Some called him the Merchant of Death, fueling public outrage. Archives suggest cunning timing, not omnipotence, still unsettling to read. In every capital, whispers followed contracts like smoke after fireworks. Fritz Haber, scientist who brought bread and gas warfare. One scientist fed billions and still darkened battlefields with gas. Fritz Haber pioneered ammonia synthesis, turning air into agricultural fertilizer. During World War I, he organized chlorine releases near Ypres. His wife, Clara Immerwahr, protested, highlighting science's moral fractures. Germany celebrated harvests while grieving soldiers blinded by yellow clouds. Afterward, Haber pursued pest control research that also raised questions. His life encapsulates science's bargain when utility outruns conscience. Universities still debate whether plaques should praise or contextualize contributions. The story remains a lecture every chemistry department quietly schedules. Thomas Midgley Jr., inventor who poisoned the air we breathe. A clever engineer accidentally changed the air for the worse. Thomas Midgley added lead to gasoline to stop engine knocking. He later helped create Freon, a refrigerant friendly to manufacturers. Both inventions seemed miracles before their consequences became painfully clear. Public demonstrations downplayed risks, even as workers reported illness. Decades later, scientists tied pollution and ozone loss to breakthroughs. Industry retooled, phasing out chemicals once introduced with triumphant confidence. Midgley's name became shorthand for unintended consequences of innovation. It's a cautionary tale engineers still debate in classrooms. Anatoly Slivko, Soviet scoutmaster who filmed his crimes. A Soviet youth leader hid crimes behind camera and camp uniforms. Anatoly Slivko ran a club in Stavropol, filming staged accidents. Parents trusted hiking trips that doubled as his hunting grounds. He claimed experiments on fainting and trauma, masking far worse. Police noticed missing boys with similar ages and school routines. Film reels recovered showed carefully arranged scenes and chilling reenactments. Arrest followed as investigators mapped disappearances to club calendars. Trials in the late Soviet era drew unusual public attention. Youth programs tightened supervision after trusting charisma over procedure. Alexander Solonik, Russian hitman who dual-wielded with precision. Moscow tabloids marveled at a hitman who escaped repeatedly. Alexander Solonik, nicknamed Sasha Makadonsky, worked for criminal groups. He was reputed ambidextrous, firing pistols with unsettling accuracy. Arrests didn't hold. Transfers and hospital stays became escape routes. Tabloid legends inflated feats while police reports focused logistics. Eventually, he surfaced in Greece, continuing under new protection. Rivalries within the underworld finally caught up in foreign surroundings. His name still appears whenever criminal folklore meets documented oddities. Post-Soviet chaos offered openings that closed only after years. Juana Barraza, luchadora known as La Mataviejitas serial killer. Mexico City seniors feared a wrestler who blended strength with disguise. Juana Barraza, La Mataviejitas, targeted elderly women living alone. Police initially profiled a man, delaying recognition of patterns. Barraza combined theft with strangulation, entering under caretaker pretenses. A survivor's account helped sketches shift toward the real suspect. Arrest near a park ended a search that embarrassed authorities. Her wrestling past fascinated tabloids, overshadowing grieving families' voices. Courts emphasized evidence chains, not headlines about masks and rings. The city updated investigative assumptions that had slowed earlier progress.
Pedro Rodrigues Filho, Brazil's vigilante serial killer, Pedrinho Matador. Brazil debated a vigilante who hunted those he considered predators. Pedro Rodrigues Filho targeted criminals, including gang members and rivals. He gained notoriety inside prisons, enforcing his own ruthless code. Television interviews later framed him as both monster and myth. Victims' families challenged narratives that glamorized personal retribution as justice. Brazilian courts recalculated sentences amid shifting laws and public attention. His story sparked questions about rehabilitation versus spectacle-driven notoriety. Documentaries struggled balancing fascination with responsibility to survivors. The case remains a caution about celebrating violence that feels convenient. Henri Désiré Landru, the real Bluebeard of Paris.
French investigators followed cinders to a man nicknamed Bluebeard. Henri Désiré Landru lured women through ads during wartime shortages. He promised marriage and stability, then ushered visitors to Gambé. Neighbors reported trunks, bonfires, and travelers who never reappeared. Police cataloged furniture sales and meticulous notebooks of appointments. Evidence centered on absence, not remains, challenging prosecutors considerably. Courts still convicted, persuaded by patterns too precise to ignore. Paris readers debated whether charm or desperation blinded potential victims. The case showcased detective work built from everyday household transactions.
Marcel Petiot, doctor who lured refugees to their deaths.
Occupied Paris hid a scheme promising escape that led nowhere. Dr. Marcel Petiot offered safe routes for Jews and resistors. Clients disappeared after arriving at his Rue Le Sueur house. Neighbors complained about smoke and a strange, persistent smell. Police eventually discovered lime, quicklime pits, and personal belongings. He claimed he killed collaborators, not clients, complicating narratives. Trial theatrics collided with forensic lists prepared by investigators. France confronted occupation-era corruption alongside breathtaking personal greed. The townhouse became shorthand for betrayal dressed up as rescue.
Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess, legend from Hungary.
Central Europe told legends about a countess whose numbers shock historians. Elizabeth Bathory lived in castles across present-day Slovakia and Hungary. Servants' testimonies described torture, though exaggeration clouds the totals. Nobles arrested her without a trial, confining her inside Chaktica. Later writers added blood-bathing myths that scholars view skeptically. Still, local records list victims, enough to horrify any century. Her relatives managed estates while authorities sealed rooms with bricks. Tourism now wrestles with legend versus documents preserved by clerks. The tale endures because castles store both paperwork and superstition.
Gilles de Rais, Joan of Arc's ally turned alleged killer.
Joan of Arc's former ally became France's darkest courtroom story. Gilles de Rais owned estates in Brittany and Loire Valley. Accusations involved kidnapped children, black arts, and lavish theatrics. Church courts and secular judges combined proceedings amid political pressure. Confessions emerged under interrogation, later sparking debates among historians. Some argue motives included seizing wealth after wartime debts. Nevertheless, local records document disappearances tied to his households. Execution ended a career that began with banners on battlefields. The contradiction keeps scholars arguing about guilt, politics, and spectacle.
Delphine Lalaurie, New Orleans socialite with a haunted reputation.
New Orleans society adored a mansion hiding unimaginable cruelty upstairs. Delphine Lalaurie hosted parties on Royal Street with impeccable charm.
A kitchen fire exposed rooms where enslaved people suffered grievously. Neighbors stormed the house. Authorities struggled to control crowds. Lalaurie fled the city, reportedly leaving for Europe soon after. Newspapers published inventories, chains, and testimonies that shocked residents. The mansion later became folklore, entwining ghosts with documented abuse. Tours still pause outside, acknowledging victims before discussing legends. The facade reminds everyone how elegance can mask horrifying realities. Issei Sagawa, the killer the law couldn't keep behind bars. Paris police handled a case that challenged jurisdictions and justice. Issei Sagawa killed a Dutch student, René Hartevelt, in 1981. He was arrested in France, then found legally unfit for trial. Deported to Japan, he avoided prison while becoming a media curiosity. Public outrage followed him, as interviews sensationalized admitted violence. Families criticized coverage that rewarded notoriety with financial opportunities. Publishers later expressed regret as audiences questioned their ethics. The case highlighted loopholes between nations' legal and mental evaluations. It remains a warning about spectacle overpowering responsibility to victims. Richard Kuklinski, Iceman, contract killer who loved to talk. True crime television met a man eager to narrate murders. Richard Kuklinski claimed contract killings for New Jersey and New York. He discussed cyanide, freezers, and mob connections with unusual openness. Investigators corroborated some details while dismissing other grandiose stories. A sting operation using an undercover agent finally secured evidence. Court records anchored televised confessions to charges that would stick. Viewers debated whether charisma distorted scale, motive, and method. He spent later years giving interviews while serving long sentences. The nickname Iceman lingered, even as transcripts narrowed the truth. Carl Tanzler, doctor who tried to keep love forever. Key West gossip turned macabre with a doctor's secret shrine. Carl Tanzler loved Elena de Hoyos, a tuberculosis patient. After her death, he visited the graveyard night after night. Years later, authorities found her body hidden in his home. Neighbors described music, perfumes, and a house lit strangely. Court proceedings focused on grave robbing and community outrage. The case became Florida folklore, unsettling, and tragically romanticized. Museums later debated displaying artifacts linked to the scandal. It's a reminder that obsession can wear a gentleman's coat. Anatoly Moskvin, grave robber who turned graves into dolls. Nizhny Novgorod police found dolls that were not dolls. Anatoly Moskvin, a historian, had visited cemeteries for years. Inside his apartment, authorities discovered mummified girls dressed elaborately. He claimed motives of preservation, not harm, shocking investigators completely. Parents identified clothing, photographs, and toys positioned like company. Psychiatric evaluations followed, complicating criminal proceedings and public anger. Neighbors recalled lectures about cemetery history, now sounding disturbingly rehearsed. The apartment's quiet hallway became a symbol of unnoticed horror. It left Russia re-evaluating mental health systems and cemetery security. Sawney Bean, Scotland's cave clan cannibals. Scotland tells a cave legend that refuses to die. Sawney Bean allegedly led a clan of cannibal highwaymen. Stories place them in Ayrshire caves, ambushing travelers at night. Historians doubt the timelines, pointing toward embellished pamphlet fiction. Yet tours still visit sites, embracing spooky heritage with winks. Ballads mention rescues, raids, and royal justice sweeping in. The tale survives because fear loves cliffs, torches, and caves. Guides now explain myth-making alongside geography and political anxieties. Visitors leave knowing legends can teach skepticism without spoiling fun. Heinrich Kramer, witch hunter who wrote the Malleus Maleficarum, a single handbook intensified witch hunts across German-speaking lands. Heinrich Kramer authored Malleus Maleficarum, urging harsh inquisitorial methods. He clashed with bishops, yet his text circulated widely anyway. Printers reissued volumes, turning anxiety into standardized courtroom scripts. Accusations often targeted outcasts, midwives, and quarrelsome neighbors. Later scholars dismantled his arguments,
exposing biases and procedural shortcuts. Still, archives hold sentences traceable to his relentless handbook. It's a reminder how publishing can weaponize fear with footnotes. Europe eventually reformed courts, leaving superstition fewer official doors. Stalin's secret executioner Vasily Blokhin killed thousands silently. Soviet archives revealed an executioner working night after night. Vasily Blokhin, an NKVD officer, supervised shootings with precision. During 1940, Katyn Forest became a code word for massacre. Polish officers vanished from camps, later identified by personal effects. Orders came from above. Paperwork traveled faster than whispers. Witness accounts described leather aprons, soundproof basements, and timed trucks. For decades, propaganda blamed others until documents forced acknowledgement. Memorials now list names, emphasizing individuals over geopolitical arguments. The profession stayed secret even while history recorded its echoes. Shiro Ishii, Unit 731, Mastermind of Human Experimentation. In occupied China, a military lab turned science into weapons. Shiro Ishii led Unit 731 near Harbin during wartime years. Researchers there performed experiments on prisoners, testing disease and frostbite. Field tests spread pathogens, with villages suffering unexplained outbreaks. After surrender, some personnel received immunity, fueling lasting controversy. Survivors' stories emerged slowly, constrained by politics and stigma. Museums in China document artifacts retrieved from abandoned facilities. Japan's discussions about acknowledgement remain sensitive and politically charged. The unit symbolizes how war invites science to cross forbidden lines. Pedro Lopez, monster of the Andes, claimed hundreds. Andean markets remembered a stranger who befriended children, then vanished. Pedro Lopez drifted between Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru during upheaval. Witnesses described gifts, promises, and remote paths near towns. Arrests produced confessions. Investigators matched scenes across national borders. Courts struggled with jurisdiction and records during unstable political periods. Release decisions later stunned the public, sparking international criticism. New disappearances were blamed on him, though documentation remains disputed. Families continued searching, organizing vigils, and demanding cross-border cooperation. His name still frightens parents from Bogota to Quito today. Luis Garavito, Colombia's La Bestia, hunted vulnerable children. Colombia confronted horror when investigators linked disappearances to one man. Luis Garavito targeted street children, posing as a helpful adult. He moved between cities during the 1990s, exploiting national turmoil. Police mapped clothing caches and crime scenes found near highways. A pair of glasses reportedly helped investigators narrow their suspect. Confessions followed, with reconstructions filmed at multiple rural locations. Sentencing laws created debates about proportionality and early release. Colombia expanded programs for missing children and improved interagency coordination. Families turned grief into activism, demanding reforms and better prevention.